This episode is sponsored by
My Local CFO, helping you build stronger growth by connecting your financial picture to your operational goals. Follow them on Facebook and LinkedIn at My Local CFO or visit their website at www.mylocalcfo.com.
Hey, it's the More Than I Do live podcast with
Derek
and Sherelle. We're super excited to have you today. What is the More Than I Do podcast?
It's a place where we talk about being married and in business.
Why?
Because nobody's talking about it, and we've been doing this for going on 10 years now.
Almost 10 years of business this year, and 16, almost 17 years in marriage.
That's right.
And we figure we have
something to say.
Hey. So, one of the things that we have to say, and you hear us talk about all the time, is communication.
Yes.
Communication. It's the root, it's the foundation, whether it's marriage, whether it's business. No matter what you're doing in life, communication is definitely one of those core keys that you have to have.
Yes, and today we have a specialist in communication.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm super excited. We have Helen Moses. She's a voice communication coach and owner of Speak Up Communications.
Once an authority pleaser who worried about saying the wrong thing out of fear of rejection, Helen now speaks confidently from her heart and empowers amazing people who are tired of being in the background to bring their authentic voice to light.
Helen has 30 years of combined training and experience as a singer, speech language pathologist. Wow, that's a mouthful. Distinguished Toastmaster and state leader with Toastmasters International.
Not to mention she holds a bachelor's degree in vocal performance and a master's degree in speech language pathology, and is the best-selling author of
Voice Unleashed, Speaking Up with Faith and Courage.
An accomplished public speaker and facilitator, and the speaker coach of TEDx Raleigh since 2017.
Her mission is to bring more peace and understanding to our world through the power of excellent communication, starting right at home.
Yeah, she's been married to her husband, James. Shout out to James.
Hi,
for
James.
23 years. And while he doesn't work with her in her business, his support has been the foundation of Helen's ability to grow her business. When you're married, whether you're in business together or not, you're still in business together, right?
Still in business together.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring to you none other than our friend and the voice and communication coach, Miss Helen Moses. Hey.
Hey there.
How are you?
I'm really super good. It's been a great day, and I am excited to be here.
We're excited to have you today.
Yes.
We could talk about a lot of things, but one of the things that I enjoy talking to you about, because I learn so much every time you learn a lot, is communication.
Yes.
So I'm just going to dive right into it. How long have you been in business, and what made you start this business?
I have owned my business for 8 years. This is the 9th year in business. And I launched it because my husband got laid off. He got laid off from being continuously working for 20 plus years. And I was still working part-time at that time as a speech language pathologist. And I thought, now's my chance to use my voice and my ability to make a contribution to my family, and I'll provide the benefits for a while. And then I couldn't get a job at the time. I got second interviews, but I never got hired. And then he did get a job, and our benefits were restored. And I was kind of primed to go back to work in some fashion. And it became obvious that what I needed to do was start my own business. So that was the end of 2012 that he got hired at the new company. And I formed the business in January of 2013.
Oh, wow.
Wow. I just love that story because I had a similar experience starting a business as well. Sometimes it takes a layoff. I remember, because people know I'm a man of faith. I remember looking to the sky and saying, Lord, you're funny, because he's told me already to start the business, but he needed to push me to do it. So I totally can relate to the story.
Yeah, I think there was a reason why I couldn't get hired either. I think my faith would tell me the same thing.
And funny enough, I think that was around the same time.
Around the same time?
Around the same time frame, around the same year that those things were happening. So that's interesting. Oh my gosh. Okay. So we have a question we ask everyone who's married, whether you're married in business or not.
Okay.
But what was being married, and how long have you been married? 23 years, right?
23, yes.
So, okay, you got a lot of wisdom in this area. So going down the aisle to I do, we usually have a perception or a notion of what marriage is going to be like. What is one of the biggest things that you had a perception of, but it turned out, oh no, it's not what I thought it was. It's something, whether it's good or bad, it's something that I had to adjust to.
Well, we dated for 5 years before we got married. So we did know each other pretty well, but you still don't really know somebody until you live with them and on a daily basis. So the marriage at that point, fortunately, it's the honeymoon years and you're so in love that you can overlook a lot of things that might otherwise bother you. But just learning about another person's habits took more adjustment than I realized it would. And it was an effort, very much an effort. For my husband too, no kidding, because I have a lot of things that I was like, he was being introduced to all my things, like don't hang the toilet paper that way, and don't put the toothpaste that way, all my things.
Yeah.
So it was a two-way thing, but getting used to the other person's things and loving them through it was a harder commitment than I realized, but one I'm really glad I have made.
Wow. Loving them through it.
Yeah.
So what would be 23 years of marriage? What's your number one advice for couples?
Talk to each other.
Yep.
And not just about the weather.
Right.
Talk about the difficult things, which brings us to communication.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it being the root of all successes and challenges. Tell me about that.
Yeah.
Well, I believe it is. When we talk to people, let's just talk about speaking first. I mean, there's communication in written form and gesture form and digital form as well, but let's just talk about speaking and talking first. When we have this conversation with someone, there are many opportunities for misunderstandings, even when you're face to face. And that they come about because the other person maybe isn't paying really good attention to you. So they sort of are kind of listening, but they're not really.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And you then think, say James is the one trying to talk to me, and I'm sort of kind of listening. James believes that I have heard and received what he wanted me to hear. And I have a choice. I didn't really hear it, so I get to say and own up to it and say, I didn't really hear that. I wasn't able to completely pay attention. I'm very sorry. Or I can pretend like I heard it. But the danger is if I pretend like I heard it, which I think most of us are inclined to do, then he thinks I got it. He thinks I got it, but I didn't. And that's the foundation for miscommunication that builds on itself and leads to mistrust.
Let's stop there for 1 second, because you said a mouthful right then. So there's a couple of things that I want to make sure we dissect as we move forward.
Okay.
Number one, let's back up, and can you define for us communication?
Sure. Communication is the exchange of information from one party to another. Good communication is the exchange of information from one party to another that is received as intended.
Received as intended. So that's where that speaking and listening comes in.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Now, when we talk about married couples first, let's go there first before we talk about business. And you talk about, you just gave an example of saying something and someone not listening completely, and then saying, oh, yeah, I got you. I heard you. And really didn't understand you. And you talked about that leading. That's where the speaking and listening comes in, right?
Yes.
Two different skills.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about those two different skills, what they require?
Sure. Well, listening is the harder one. So let's start there. Listening requires a lot of patience, a lot of focus, a lot of love. It's hard to maintain a listening posture or listening mentality for a long time, but if you're not used to it, you can build up. You can start small and build up. But listening involves not just paying attention to the words that come out of the person's mouth, but also to the tone in which they say them.
Mm-hmm.
Listening involves paying attention to their facial expressions and their body language, and making sure that that you're hearing that part too. Speaking involves thinking about what it is you want to say and trying to say it in as clear and concise a way as possible. Doing it that way, clearly and concisely, is a sign of respect for your communication partner, because you're making sure you present it in a way that's easy to understand, and you're presenting it in a way that's going to take the least amount of mental energy for them to effectively listen.
Got you.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because as you was talking, I used to think that I was a great listener, right? But I really just heard what people was telling me. I really wasn't paying attention to their gesture and the tone and things like that. And so I'm learning how to be a better listener. And then when you talked about speaking, I wish I spoke like I wrote emails, because it takes me forever to write an email. I can take an hour on an email because I'm really thinking about what I'm saying and what the person will interpret on the other side constantly. But when I'm talking, I'll just talk.
Yes, we do that, especially those of us who are more extroverted. I am an extrovert and my husband is an introvert. So we have learned to help each other through each other's communication styles. And James needs to be able to think through what he's saying before he says it. I need to hear myself think out loud before I decide what I've said that is really what I want to say. And so we have to, I'm patient with him and listening while he's figuring out his words. And he's learned to listen to me with patience while I get the stuff out and then summarize it. And he knows that when I get to the summary, that's the clear and concise part.
So that you just talked about me and Derek, because it's probably the same thing here. I'm the one who need to hear it out loud. And I'm glad you brought communication styles, because I need to hear it out loud. And what I've recently learned, this is in the last year, Helen, and maybe last couple months. I mean, this is very fresh. What I learned was, okay, I need to go and just say it out loud to myself somewhere else so that I can figure it out. And then I can bring it to him clear, like you talked about, clear and effective, and communicate it clearly and effective, rather it being me bouncing off of him like a whiteboard, right? And then erasing and be like, well, no, not that part, this part over here. But they can't unhear what you said, and then you don't have it all together and they're ready to move into action.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sorrel. And when things really matter, the important conversations that we're having, I do think through it ahead of time. I take the time away from him so that I can prepare. Sometimes actually say it out loud, sometimes write it in a journal or on a piece of paper. to help me sound it out the way I want it to go. And I rehearse it in my mind. Sometimes I practice what I'm going to say. But because I respect him and I understand when we're talking about something serious that may require him to take action, I need to only give him the action that I hope that he will take,
Right.
and present that to him in a polite, respectful way.
Yeah, that's funny because I think about I think about myself and I see myself. I remember when I was in corporate America, I had this coworker and we worked very well together. And before she got to the point because she knows I'm a fixer. Whatever problem she brings to me, I'm gonna fix because that's how I work. I'm a fixer. And she would start talking and she would say, hold on, I don't need you to fix anything. I just want to vent.
That's right.
And I respected that.
Yeah. In my marriage, we had a similar thing because I went through some training in my church called Stephen Ministry. And it's like a peer ministry. And you get partnered with someone who's going through some type of crisis. And the core work that one does as a Stephen minister is show up and listen. That's the main point of that ministry. Just show up and listen. We're not there to advise. And that was a very important lesson for me to learn. And I use that when I listen to my husband, to colleagues, to my clients. I use that skill. And the showing up and just being present and just listening was a role that James was not used to. Because he's also a fixer. He's an engineer, very analytical guy, brilliant man. I just love him so much. But anyway, he's a wonderful man and doesn't think like I do. So when we were early married, that's when I was going through the Stephen ministry training. And I'd say to him, I need Steve. I don't need James. I need Steve. And that would be his cue that, okay, I just need to just vent. And his job is to not fix it.
Yeah.
There's an awesome video out there on YouTube World. I encourage anyone who's not seen it to go look up something about the nail. And it's not about the nail. It's a short video. It's called It's Not About the Nail. And the woman is trying to explain what's happening. And I won't ruin it, but her husband wants to fix it. And anyway, I'm just going to leave it at that because it's worth hunting up and finding it. It's a gem.
Okay.
It speaks to what we were just talking about.
Yeah. And I've gotten to the point now that just like the coworker, I'm like, I just need you to listen. I don't want you to say anything. I don't want you to fix it. I already know what I'm going to do, but I just need to vent about it. Right. And he's like, that's a whole nother side, right? Okay. I could turn this off and I could just be present and listen.
And what a gift. Yes.
That is a gift. I think the other thing, Helen, too, is that so often it's hard to listen because you're waiting to respond.
Yes. So learning to listen and be present it's kind of like that abundance mentality. It's like there's going to be time for you to say what you want to say. But when you're truly in listening mode, you need to be thinking of this is a gift. I'm giving a gift here. And the more I interrupt it with my questions or my thoughts or relate it back to me, oh, that reminds me of a story for me in my life, back to me, that takes away from the gift.
Wow. So tell us this, because we've been talking about communication is critical to marital and business success. Tell me why is it critical? And I know somebody's like, how do you ask that question? But some people don't know why communication is critical when we talk about marriage and business success, or just success period as a person. And I know you have a little bit of your story that kind of goes along with that.
I think I know which part you're referring to. The communication is in a marriage. This is a story about marriage and business. This is a story about the fact that I hid something from James. It was all in my business and separate.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to talk to him about it, and he trusted me to not ask me about it.
Yeah.
But what was happening was I was spending way beyond what I could afford. I couldn't pay it off, and I was accumulating debt, all business debt, which I like to say I managed to get these accounts with my own credit. I didn't need him to co-sign, which I was very proud of.
Yeah.
But because he had no idea what was going on, it just kept building, and I wasn't saying anything to him. And it got to the point that I was like, okay, if I don't say something now, this really could affect my marriage. And what had happened was I had accumulated, I don't remember the exact number because it was so bad. I was like, anyway, but it was close to $50,000 in debt. To be it's in my book, so it's out there in the world, so I don't have a problem telling you that. But I had to. We talked about our faith earlier, Derek. For me, I had this kind of come to Jesus moment, and that was hard enough. But what I really had to have was my come to James moment. And I had to come clean because I needed his help.
Yeah.
And it took him some time when I finally told him, and he knew something was wrong. I mean, I was physically feeling ill. I couldn't talk to him. It was affecting my mood, which affected his mood. He was suspicious. I can only imagine what he was thinking was really going on.
Yeah.
So when I told him finally, he was shocked and mad, rightfully so. But he took the time to think about it, and I gave him the space and the time to think about it. And I think maybe he was a little relieved because, this is money. Well, we can actually come up with a plan to do something about money. And so 3 days later or so, he came back to me and he had a plan, and I listened, and I allowed him to help me get through it. And most of that debt is gone, but I saved some back that I'm still paying off because that's my responsibility, and I wanted to be the one to pay off the last part of it. But I used him as a resource. He's very knowledgeable about finances, and I hadn't been using that resource that was right there in my own home because I was too proud, too ashamed, too embarrassed to tell him. And if I had just told him at the beginning, oh my gosh, so much could have been avoided.
Yeah. And we know that in marriages today, of people who are listening, there may be something going on just like that, right? Where that lack of communication, lack of honesty is leading to mistrust, hidden issues, and increased tension. And it can have the other spouse. And I think you hit on something in your story, that it had your spouse who knows what he thought it was, because you know when something's not right? You know when you're not on the same page. And your mind goes rampant with crazy thoughts and crazy things. So the difference between the difficulties that were happening because you were holding this back, no matter how big or small it is, right? And then the ease of what happened in the marriage afterwards. Can you kind of describe the before and after?
Yeah. It was what a gift again. This awful situation that just hurt me so bad to have to tell him turned out to be great for my business. Because number one, he helped me address the debt. And not just the debt, but as you know, you two know in your business, and I know we even talked a little bit about this, how to look at the expenses and the return on investment, and how to decide which ones are really necessary now, which ones could we cut back on, which ones could we eliminate. And so the next year, I actually cut my expenses down more than 50%. And my profit, that was the first year I was profitable in my business.
Wow. But even the lack of communication was hurting your business.
It was hurting my business. And I wasn't able to be truthful with him about the fact that I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah. And it bled over to the business.
It did.
That secret is there, and it's hindering you from doing other things that you needed to do.
And I'll tell you something else that it did, how it affected my business, is it drove my confidence down. Wow. And therefore, it made me feel less valuable. I wasn't worth as much. It affected my pricing. It affected my confidence in asking for sales and asking for certain prices. And I know I've spoken with a lot of entrepreneurs, especially women, not all, there's some men too, but many of the women I've spoken to and worked with have this issue as well. It's really hard to speak up for your value. And that's kind of what the book is about, my journey to finding my own value and finding my voice, which was so ironic because it started happening that journey after I started my business as a voice and communication coach. So I guess we all kind of do that sometimes. We end up finding ourselves in a situation we need to fix for ourselves, and then we become the expert at helping other people get through it too.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that's so key, is that you can start a business because you have that gift or that experience or that skill. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean that you're not effective and you can't help people. But I imagine now, because you've now solved it for yourself, you know, your bio talks about once an authority pleaser, mm-hmm. right, into now speaking confidently from your heart. Tell us about that, because that's big communication, and that's inside communication, right?
Yeah.
Before you even get to the external, it's the internal communication. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, you know, those voices in our heads. Voices spoke to me through clutter in my house, which was a pretty big problem at the beginning of years of my business. Mm-hmm. I had young children at that point. They were about, when I started my business, they were about I don't know. They weren't teenagers yet. Maybe my son was just early into his teens. But the clutter would talk to me, and it would say, "You're a bad mother because you can't keep a clean house. You know, how can your children possibly succeed in life because you aren't even showing them how to clean a bathroom?" Mm-hmm. Or make up their bed. I mean, I tried some, but you know, it just, and then I'd lose confidence in that. And I would think, I'm just a housewife. I'm just a full-time mom. And that's so far from the truth. Yeah. But I spent my life looking for validation externally, mm-hmm. that I was valuable, that I was worth something. The shift in me, which started happening about 5 years ago, allowed me to see that I've been valuable the whole time. Just because I exist, just because God created me. Mm-hmm. And that I can embrace that. I can believe that. Mm-hmm. And I don't have to do anything. I haven't earned that. It's just because I'm a human being that I have intrinsic value. Yeah. That was the first step, was recognizing that, working through that so that I could start to deny some of those voices that I tried to listen to, that I needed them to validate me. I needed them to tell me I was good enough, I was worth something. As I grew more confident internally, then I could say no and shut out more of those voices externally. And the funny thing is that most of those voices externally were actually internal too. They never actually said those things to me.
Yeah.
I actually made it up and projected it onto them and assumed that's what they thought.
Wow. Yeah, that happens.
You said a mouthful. I'm getting ready to give a spouse tip.
Okay.
Whether you're in business with your spouse or not, show them the support and validate them through your support, whether you're in business with them or not, because your spouse looks to you for validation.
Yes. Yes. And we can take that opportunity to do it every day. That kind of circles back to my loving them through the things and the annoyances and the, you know, whatever they may be, those problems, but loving them through and validating them daily. I think that's excellent advice, Derek.
So I want to get to two things before we get out of here.
Okay.
Time flies by so fast. The first thing is, because you know I love this story. When we talk about critical communication in business, I know you had something happen when we were traveling together over on the West Coast, and it just brought home why communication in business was so important. And I want you to kind of talk about that a little bit, and then we'll go from there, and just so that people can get your information and follow you and get your book and things of that nature.
Okay, sure. I think this is the one that you're talking about. We were in California together at a conference, and I was trying to get my ticket, my boarding pass on my phone's app, but I couldn't. So I had to call customer service. And of course, that's usually not fun. It's not something we anticipate with delight, calling customer service. So I called and I got a woman who I thought was very professional, very helpful, very friendly. And before the call ended, my boarding pass was on my phone.
Mhm.
So I was very pleased with her, and I felt like I was very pleased with Delta. That was the airline that it was. And there was a question at the end. It said, would you stay on the phone to answer a 1-question survey? And I was feeling good because she was so nice. And I said, sure. And here was the question that changed the trajectory of my business. The question was, based on your experience with the person who helped you just now, how likely would you be to hire that person as a customer service representative for your company?
Mhm.
And I gave her a 5 because she was nice and she was friendly and she was helpful. And then I thought, you know what? I don't actually know that. I know that her voice sounded nice and friendly and professional.
Mhm.
But she could have been mean and rude and still gotten my boarding pass on the phone. I would have flown home, but I would have thought twice about using Delta next time because of that negative experience. Or she could have not been able to help me get the boarding pass on my phone, but she could have, in a very nice, pleasant, kind way, referred me or transferred me to someone else who could, or told me what to do once I got to the airport. And I could have then said, wow, she did everything she could to help me. And I was really impressed with her service and therefore with Delta. So that was the question that made the difference for me, because as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as companies,
Mhm.
our voices represent our businesses.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if we don't pay attention to the way we're communicating, we could lose customers.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story. You know, that's one of my favorite stories. I was there, so I witnessed it firsthand. But when you got off and the light bulb that went off with, wait a minute, but this is really important. Wait a minute. This is communication at its finest. That the core of communication just happened here with
That's
that
right.
question. And it really speaks to the criticalness of communication in business and dealing with other people and just overall in life. Helen, this time has been amazing.
Definitely amazing. And I enjoyed that story. I know you guys traveled together before, but I've never heard that story. And that story was awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Impactful.
Yeah.
Very impactful.
It is.
Tell us how our audience can get in touch with you, because you are a coach, meaning you're
Yes.
a voice and communication coach. You help with TEDx's, so getting speakers ready for TEDx. We were talking about this right before we got on, getting speakers ready who are booked for TEDx. And you help them communicate effectively. And then you just work with companies and people in general around communication. Tell us how we can get in touch with you.
The very first and most easy way to do it is to go to my website, which is helenmoses.com. And there are links to different social media. There's a way to contact me directly from the website, and you can learn about the different trainings that I do and learn a little bit more about me on that page as well. You can also go to my Facebook business page, which is there on the screen, at Helen Moses, your voice coach, and you can connect with me there.
Wonderful. Last thing, I have to ask this as we're getting out of here, because you did a wonderful survey, being in communication and when COVID started and dealing with masks. Did you post that anywhere, or that survey that you did, or the conclusion for that?
I think I wrote it's been a while, but the conclusion was that most people were really frustrated with masks, but they knew they needed to wear them. And the idea was to keep them on and to over articulate, move your mouth extra carefully behind the mask. And also I'll add now, just to give yourself a little extra oomph, a little extra energy when you speak, so your volume is a little bit louder and it doesn't get quite as muffled from the mask. But I wrote a blog post about it, I believe, and if so, it's on my website. And if not, then it was in an email. But it was a great survey, and it was very interesting feedback that I got.
Yeah.
Awesome. And those things that you just talked about, talking through the mask, are very important. Is there anything you can advise as far as how to protect your voice during that? Because I have strained vocal cords because of yelling through a mask.
Yeah. Well, first of all, sign up for me on the website. You can sign up for a free 15-minute call with me, and it will allow you to talk to me about that, because you may be tightening the muscles too much here, and you need to use a little bit more oomph in your abdomen and your diaphragm to get the power up through your voice without putting the strain here. And so that is something, based on my speech therapy background and my singing background, I can talk to you about as well.
Yeah. All right.
Awesome.
You got it. HelenMoses.com is where you go. Wealth of knowledge when it comes around communication. And she's got a complimentary 15 minutes to answer some questions and to see if you're a good fit. Helen, as always, it's never enough time when we get together. Love you dearly.
I love you too. I love you both. Thank you for letting me be a part of this tonight.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And to our audience, thank you. Whether you're listening on the replay or you were live with us tonight, we want to hear from you about communication and your marriage and your business. What are some of the hurdles you're going through? How have you conquered communication in your marriage and in your business? We want to know it. So in order to stay in touch with us,
go to our website, www.morethanIdo.life. or follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn at More Than I Do Podcast. And you can watch us or listen to us wherever you grab your podcast.
Wherever you grab your podcast. All right. It's that time. Thank you so much for tuning into the More Than I Do Virtual Live Podcast. I'm Sherelle.
And I'm Derek.
Until next Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, we say, take care.
Take care.
This episode is sponsored by
My Local CFO, helping you build stronger growth by connecting your financial picture to your operational goals. Follow them on Facebook and LinkedIn at My Local CFO or visit their website at www.mylocalcfo.com.